Pay attention to these two people in this CCTV footage from 5:45 p.m. The first is Elias Thorne, a 41-year-old mechanic, visibly broken by a recent loss, looking utterly drained. The second, Dr. Vivian Holloway, 52, a renowned and respected surgeon, strides past, oblivious. Two souls separated by status about to collide. Elias, consumed by righteous grief after Dr. Holloway's medical negligence, will murder her. His rage was fueled not by malice but by the devastating loss of his only daughter, a pain you will understand. Elias Thorne, 41 years old, just a simple auto mechanic, his hands stained with oil and his heart stained with grief. Elias wasn't a criminal. He was a father, a widower who dedicated his life to raising his 12-year-old daughter, Lily, alone after his wife died young. His world revolved around her. He lived paycheck to paycheck, but his tiny garage was his honest kingdom. Then the system broke him. When Lily needed an emergency procedure, a costly elective surgery that Elias sacrificed everything for, the outcome was devastating. A medical error, a negligent simple mistake, snatched Lily away. The system, the hospitals, the courts, they all dismissed his pain. They offered settlements that felt like an insult to his daughter's memory. Elias, once hardworking and good, became a shell of a man, an emotionally broken victim of a system designed to protect the powerful. His low wage, his simple life, it made him invisible. His deep, profound sorrow turned into a slow, burning obsession for justice that no court would give him. Then we have Dr. Vivian Holloway, 52 years old, a towering figure in the medical community. She earned well over $400,000 a year, a graduate of Yale, with a sprawling waterfront home and a luxury car that signified her elite status. Dr. Holloway represented the pinnacle of success. On the surface, she was admirable, brilliant, and respected. Yet, her professional success masked a deep, isolating loneliness. Divorced with no close family, her life was clinically perfect and tragically empty. Crucially, Dr. Holloway harbored a subtle, yet profound condescension towards those she considered less educated or lower class. She ran a tight, efficient hospital ward, but she had little patience or empathy for people like Elias Thorne, a father who couldn't afford a high-powered legal team. Her flawless veneer hid a cold indifference, a clinical detachment that treated Elias's daughter's life as a procedural error, not a devastating human tragedy. This indifference, this inability to see the pain she had caused in a common man's life, was the exact vulnerability that fueled Elias's emotional justification for vengeance. The trajectory of both their lives was sealed on May 14th, 18 months before the crime. The setting was the antiseptic waiting room of the prestigious Metropolitan Medical Center. Elias was there for a rushed 15-minute consultation about the aftermath of Lily's botched surgery. He was distraught, visibly clutching Lily's favorite stuffed animal. Dr. Holloway, immaculate in her expensive suit, arrived late, radiating a sense of hurried importance. Elias tried to ask questions, desperate for an explanation, for an apology, but she cut him off. Her tone was clinical, dismissive. "Mr. Thorne," she stated without looking up from her clipboard, "the complications were rare but documented. Your daughter was compromised. The hospital has addressed this. Your time is up." Elias remembers the exact moment, 4:17 p.m. Her words, her indifference, wounded him more profoundly than any physical injury. She saw him not as a grieving father, but as a low-income annoyance, a potential lawsuit to be managed. That brief, cold interaction, a clash of classes and of empathy, was the point of no return. Elias left the hospital that day feeling not just robbed of his daughter, but utterly dehumanized by the woman whose carelessness had caused the loss. Over the following year, Elias descended into a debilitating cycle of impotent rage. He exhausted his savings attempting to sue the hospital and Dr. Holloway for malpractice. He hired 2 different lawyers who, after collecting hefty retainers, repeatedly failed to overcome the hospital's powerful legal defense, which was skillfully coordinated to shield the senior surgeon. The legal system, designed to seek justice, felt instead like a rigged game where his poverty was his fatal flaw. In October, 4 months before the crime, his final appeal was rejected, labeling Lily's death an unfortunate, unforeseeable complication. This was the breaking point. Elias started drinking heavily. His mechanic shop closed more often than it was open. and his once neat home spiraled into a mess. He would sit for hours, staring at Lily's empty swing set, the overwhelming sense of betrayal consuming him. He wrote dozens of unanswered letters to Dr. Holloway, not threatening, but pleading for her to acknowledge his pain, to simply apologize. She never responded. The indifference solidified his belief. Dr. Holloway was protected by her wealth and status, and the law would never force her to face the true consequence of her actions. His profound depression curdled into a cold, calculated obsession for restorative justice, a justice he would have to execute himself, consumed entirely by the need for the one thing Dr. Holloway refused to give, a reckoning for his loss. Elias began to plan. This wasn't impulsive rage. It was a methodical response to unbearable emotional pain. He researched, not weapons, but methods of incapacitation that mirrored his feeling of being paralyzed by the system. He visited a hardware store on January 5th, purchasing specific, unassuming items: duct tape, heavy-duty rope, and a large, empty duffel bag. Crucially, he spent weeks observing Dr. Holloway's routine. He knew her schedule, the expensive gym she visited at 6 a.m., the specific parking spot she used, the late nights at her practice. He took detailed notes, recording license plates and security camera blind spots. His final motivation was not murder for its own sake, but a desperate, final attempt to force her to experience the powerlessness he felt when he lost Lily. He wrote a chilling, concise letter addressed to the police, explaining exactly his emotional rationale. She stole my world. I must make her acknowledge what she did. The finality of the planning, born from a wounded heart, was the only escape from his unending suffering. The morning of February 22nd, cold, dark. Elias, wearing a borrowed utility uniform to blend in, waited in a parked white van near Dr. Holloway's luxury gym garage. At 6:15 a.m., Dr. Holloway appeared, impeccably dressed. Elias approached, acting as a maintenance worker, claiming her tire was dangerously flat. Dr. Holloway, initially annoyed, conceded when she saw the damage. This was the moment. As she bent to look at the tire, Elias struck. There was no confrontation, no protracted struggle, just the efficient, practiced action born of weeks of planning. He used a chloroform-soaked cloth, quickly subduing her. The entire event, caught on a distant security camera that police would later scrutinize frame by frame, lasted less than 90 seconds. Elias, driven by a hollow sense of duty, not bloodlust, quickly bundled her into the back of his van. His expression on the CCTV was not one of triumph, but of profound, terrible emptiness, a man finalizing the devastating consequence of his unbearable emotional injury. He drove to a remote, abandoned warehouse he used for side work, knowing the dashcam in the van would capture their final conversation. Dr. Holloway's immediate disappearance was a shock to the wealthy community, but to Elias, it was the only way to finally be heard. The investigation launched immediately after a 911 call from Dr. Holloway's assistant, who reported her missed surgery. Detectives Miller and Chen were assigned the case. Initial assumptions leaned towards a robbery, given her wealth, but the meticulous nature of the disappearance felt off. The breakthrough came 2 days later, when a patrol officer discovered the empty, distinctive white van abandoned near the warehouse. Inside, the dashcam. The video was horrific, not for gore, but for the chilling, sustained conversation it captured. Elias, his voice steady but thick with repressed pain, forcing a bound and terrified Dr. Holloway to listen, not to a ransom demand, but to a minute-by-minute account of Lily's final hours. The revelation sickened the detectives. The motive was not financial, but an emotional reckoning for perceived negligence. The ultimate plot twist came in the warehouse. Dr. Holloway's body was found, but not violently attacked. Elias, true to his need for justification, had meticulously set up a scene where he recorded her final moments, not of suffering, but of forced acknowledgement of her failure, before administering an overdose of the same medication that sealed Lily's fate. Hours later, Elias walked into the precinct, the chilling letter of justification and his confession in hand, a man finally at peace, having traded his freedom for the recognition of his daughter's life. The trial of Elias Thorne began a year later, dominating headlines. The prosecution argued for first-degree murder, citing the cold, clear premeditation, the surveillance, the planning, the acquisition of materials. The defense, led by a surprisingly empathetic public defender, focused entirely on the concept of diminished capacity due to profound emotional trauma and the systemic failure that left Elias with no recourse. The dashcam footage, played for the jury, was the most devastating evidence. It wasn't about the act of killing, but the chilling reason. A desperate, broken father's need for a powerful woman to simply admit her error. Elias, on the stand, spoke honestly, not about malice, but about the suffocating pain of losing Lily and the system's indifference. The jury struggled. They saw a killer, but they also saw a victim of a deep emotional injustice. The verdict was a compromise, guilty of second-degree murder. On June 15th, the judge sentenced Elias to 20 years, stating that while the act was a terrible crime, the court cannot ignore the emotional provocation that ignited the fire. The justice felt deeply ambiguous. No one was truly satisfied, but the public, having heard his story, largely understood the profound, justifiable emotional reasons for his terrible act. The case of Elias Thorne and Dr. Vivian Holloway left a difficult moral stain on the city. It forced hospitals to review their patient advocacy programs, leading to new policies requiring senior doctors to personally meet with families affected by medical errors, regardless of legal action. Elias, serving his sentence, became a quiet voice for prison reform, dedicating his time to mentoring other inmates who lost children. A man finding purpose after the ultimate failure. The legacy of this case is not the condemnation of a monster, but the reflection on a systemic failure. Elias Thorne was, in many ways, a victim of the system's neglect and the chilling indifference of the powerful, a force that crushed his spirit until his only perceived escape was violence. We must ask ourselves, how many times does the system fail the broken before they choose to break the system back? His actions were criminal, but his heart, consumed by an unbearable loss, evokes a profound pity. He was, tragically, a victim of grief as much as Dr. Holloway was a victim of his misplaced vengeance.